It's time now for the Newsmaker, and this has been the fifth weekend in a row in which protesters have taken to the streets, a worrying number of whom have been chanting anti-Jewish slogans and calling for a holy war. Harassment and intimidation reached boiling point yesterday in Whitehall, with Brits waving the Union Jack subject to verbal abuse and the threat of violence. Meanwhile, in Trafalgar Square, a member of the public who was actually physically assaulted by a Palestinian protester was himself moved on by the cops. You couldn't make it up. Here's a short excerpt of what happened. We'll get you the clip shortly, but as cops turn a blind eye to calls for terror in the name of keeping the peace, is British policing no longer fit for purpose? Let's speak to former Home Office Minister and one of the best-known politicians in the country, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, I know that it's tough for law enforcement, but are officers doing enough to stand up for British values?
No, I mean, I think the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, Mark, what do we want from the police? Well, most people want to feel that if they call them because they're in danger or they're being burgled or whatever it is, that the police will come. Nowadays, it's in the lap of the gods whether they do or not. We want to feel that if we run into a difficult situation outside our homes, that there will be police nearby. There never are. They're never visible. We want to feel that they'll tackle and they'll prosecute criminals, but ask any shopkeeper when the police last took shoplifting seriously. And then when it comes to demos, what we want is that the police will act without fear or favour, that they will apply exactly the same rules to both sides of whatever argument is going on. And that certainly isn't happening at the moment. We missed the clip that you were going to show, but that's a pretty good demonstration of partiality, of dealing with one side, either with fear or favour, whatever it happens to be that motivates the police. But it's quite wrong. And I think the British public has lost confidence in them. The fact remains is some police do a seriously good job. Some lose their lives in the course of their duty. We've got to remember that. It would be quite wrong to forget that. But on the whole, I think most Brits would say now that we don't get the service that we certainly used to get from the police. And as far as this marching goes, what exactly is Parliament doing? Now, what Reform UK have called for is a straightforward law that says nobody demonstrates or marches, doesn't matter what the cause is, nobody demonstrates or marches on either Armistice Day itself or Remembrance Sunday, both those days, because the only show in town on those days should be respect for veterans.
Yeah, most definitely. Listen, we're going to play that clip in just a moment. You'll see some highlights there. But before we get to it, do you accept the arguments of police chiefs, Anne, who say that they're hamstrung by the law? Are they powerless to tackle the hatred on these marches?
Oh, of course they're not powerless to tackle hatred. Good heavens, they arrest street preachers at the drop of a hat. Of course they're not powerless. They won't exercise the power. I mean, when they can say with a straight face, oh, well, you know, they didn't really want to arrest anybody for calling for a jihad because that can mean different things. It might not necessarily mean a holy war. I mean, that is the biggest load of nonsense, that they could possibly come out with, but they do it with straight faces.
Well, indeed. Now, Anne, this is somebody that was in central London and he was protesting peacefully with a placard and he was assaulted by somebody that was, I guess, pro-Palestine. Now, take a look and let me have your measured verdicts on how the police handled this incident. Take a look.
Why are you here? Why are you here?
I'm here to have conversations.
Why are you being offensive minutes ago?
Yeah, do you want to move over there? Yeah. I'm moving you over there to prevent the breach of the peace. If I stand peacefully and people come and get aggressive with me, I'm the one breaching the peace? If your presence at that location is causing people to do that, then yes, OK?
Well, Anne, your assessment of that. This guy was standing very peacefully. He was physically assaulted with a placard and then escorted across the road by the cop, treated like the criminal.
Yes, that officer desperately needs some advice. But if that is the advice that has been given to them as to how to handle potential breaches of the peace, then those who are doing the advising need to take some serious stock of what they're doing. Because to say that if somebody is simply there being completely peaceful and that person is threatened, that therefore that person is causing the breach of the peace, not the one who's threatening them, That is just a piece of utter madness. I don't know what gets into the police sometimes, and I don't know what gets into, strikers. I don't know what gets into the Conservative government.
Listen, Anne, let me ask you about Suella Braverman. Speaking of the Conservative government, is she right to call these demonstrations hate marches?
Some of them undeniably are, but I'm perfectly certain there are also people on those marches who don't, who aren't motivated that way, who do genuinely want to protest for peace. Now, I happen to think they're misguided, but unless they are calling for a jihad, unless they are saying things that are deliberately anti-Semitic, unless they are doing those things, then it's difficult to call them hate marches. But if they are doing those things, if they are, and plenty of them are, then they are hate marches, and they should be arrested. And I go further than that. If having been arrested and convicted of causing hatred, if any of them are here on visas, as opposed to with permanent right to remain, if any of them are here on visas, revoke their visas.
And I wish we had longer. We'll do more next week. My thanks to the former Home Office Minister, best-selling author, television personality and politics legend Anne Widdecombe, whose exasperation, I'm sure, is shared by many of you.